If you're a high-achieving Black parent who's already treating education like an asset, summer programs, private school, and the best extracurriculars, you've most likely taken note of the plummeting admissions rates for Black students at top colleges, equivalent to the segregation era, and the rapidly declining single-digit acceptance rates at some of our leading HBCUs. If you're looking around and thinking, what's happening? The rules shifted right under our kids' feet, and no one is actually naming what's going on, take a breath for a moment. If you're saying to yourself, I can't afford to guess and risk my child's options post the Supreme Court decision, then you are in the right place. You're paying attention. By the end of this video, you're going to have a clear, non-panic mental model for what to do post-affirmative action. You're going to be 100% clear on what changed and what didn't. So you can stop spiraling between doom headlines and generic advice that's completely identity neutral and not specific to Black families. And instead, start making the pre-ninth grade moves that are going to protect your child's options long-term, keeping them competitive and whole in the process. I was recently speaking with a family who did everything right on paper. Their daughter, Nia, was that high flyer. Rigorous school, advanced courses, leadership, all of the things that adults say matter. And from the outside, she looked like the dream outcome. But here's the part her parents only admitted post-graduation. Nearly every decision she made was about not disappointing anyone and staying on the prestige track, not about what she actually cared about. So she was collecting gold stars and quietly shrinking in the process. As a Black female Princeton alumna myself who was admitted to 5 top 20 colleges, I know exactly what that feels like. So here's the quiet part that no one is saying out loud. Even with our best and brightest going to the Ivy League, many are leaving with declining mental health and complete disillusionment. And their parents are wondering, how did we get here? The truth is that these signs can be noted as early as middle school when you know what to look for. One of our parents, Amanda, noted that her daughter was extremely fragile when it came to getting low grades. She was a mostly A, sometimes B student when there was an extra hard class or a difficult teacher. But her mom noticed that when she got lower grades, her complete morale suffered. She would start saying negative things like, I'm not good at this or I can't do this. And it was as if she didn't feel smart at all, even when her grades declined. The overall grade in the class, still an A. But anytime that lower grade on a quiz or a test came up, her mom saw the turmoil. And for most parents, they don't think much of it when their kid is still getting high grades. But these are actually one of the early signs. What changed when her family started working with us wasn't that we were magically removed challenge from her life, but we coached her to read her own performance like data. She started noticing how she learns, adjusting the strategy, bouncing back stronger. She shifted from just a high-achieving rule follower to an active decision maker in her own learning process. Her confidence didn't just rise, her ownership did. And her mom noted because she had more ownership, she was more in love with the process itself. This then translated to the other elements of a competitive admissions profile, like her leadership and self-selecting for the hardest academic classes. And this is so critical post-affirmative action because the families that are winning are not doing more. They're helping their kids build evidence of lived identity and self-direction early. So prestige does not come at the cost of themselves. If you want help translating all of this into a simple plan that you can follow, if your child is between grades 6 to 10, go get my complimentary guide in the description, the Ivy Readiness Roadmap for Black 6th to 10th graders. Grade by grade, it will walk you through how to prepare your child for that elite space, both getting in and actually sustaining success when they get there. All right, so let's dive into what changed and what didn't. So in hearing the policy shift, a lot of Black families just decided, well, we need to downplay Blackness and focus more on looking impressive. But what this actually caused is for a lot of Black families, copying a playbook that never actually worked in admissions in the first place. You see, a lot of parents thought and still think to this day that it's simply about great grades, high test scores, and getting into or being in one of the best private schools that have established some type of pipeline to the Ivy League or the top college. And so Black families who have had lots of success, high income, are throwing their kids into expensive camps, expensive private schools, thinking that this is going to ultimately solve the problem. And what we're doing, whether consciously or subconsciously, when we follow this strategy, is we're essentially saying that my money is what's guaranteeing the admission. But it has always been true, and it's even more true post-affirmative action, that what colleges are actually looking for is an evidence of a unique differentiable student with a clear commitment to a social problem. They want to see that the student that they're admitting has a non-negotiable approach to how they're showing up in life, their character, and how they want to contribute their uniqueness to the world. So essentially, they're reading for identity, context, and impact through essays, recommendations, and a multi-year track record. This is the critical point. Many families think they just have to wait for their kid to suddenly get clarity about what they want to do in life. And so they allow high school to continue to be a phase of exploration. When you do that, you're setting your student up to essentially perform a narrative on the application, which is why you hear terms like passion projects, or there are camps sold to you or summer programs sold to you telling you that this will make your kid competitive, because these companies are capitalizing on your fear of your kid's activities not being enough. But at the end of the day, college admissions officers are looking for evidence. And in order to build that evidence authentically in a way that's intrinsically motivated from the student, not forced on from the parent or some outside coach or consultant, we want to start in middle school when our students are most impressionable in their developmental years to help them scaffold that journey of curiosity and exploration to really get a sense of who they are and how they want to show up in the world. I have a video on exactly that right here that I encourage you to watch after this video if you want to get a greater breakdown of how to actually implement this in middle school. So let me walk you through the 3 rules that got a lot weaker post-affirmative action. They were never truly the strategy to winning, but post this policy, they have completely become irrelevant. Firstly is that stats will help you stand out. Stats simply keep you in the conversation. Your child's profile is not going to be considered at a top college if the GPA threshold is not met and the standardized testing threshold is not met. So we can just assume that that is the prerequisite. Secondly is that leadership means titles. I get on calls literally almost every day with parents who come and they tell me all the titles that their kids have and ask me, is my kid impressive enough? It's usually parents that are coming in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade because they're wondering, have all the thousands of dollars in investments I made in middle school and early high school actually going to translate to something? They think that somehow all those investments and now their students' commitment to these leadership titles means my kid actually is a leader. So therefore, the colleges should award the leadership that my student is demonstrating. But leadership and titles are not the same thing. Thirdly, service hours prove character. I have parents come to me all the time. My student has 400 service hours. And are those enough hours? And it just simply speaks to the fact that they're operating from the old playbook. The college admissions officers are not simply looking for a minimum hours to know that a kid cares about service. At this juncture in admission, everyone knows that you need to have service hours. So it's now become just a proxy for performance. So what's stronger now is what we call the impact arc. It's not one big project. Please run from anyone trying to sell you passion projects. It's intentional progression over years. Your child chooses a lane. They deepen their skills. They build trust with themselves and with the community they're building with. And they actually create something that outlives the application. Surprise, you don't need to optimize everything for the application. You can actually focus on your student becoming the best version of themselves and trust that the admissions process will reward them when you're following the principles that I'm outlining here. And for me, as a Black woman who attended Princeton, who saw so many of my peers suffer, as I mentioned earlier, this is so important to me. Because in the Black community, so often Black excellence gets equated for performance rather than wholeness and becoming. Being Black is not a marketing angle, and it was never just some checkbox that needed to be checked by an admissions officer. It is deep context, it is culture, it is truth, and our students need to be empowered to live into that more deeply post-affirmative action. Not simply saying, I'm Black, but this is how my unique cultural context has shaped how I contribute and show up in the world. The new policy does not mean that a kid cannot share their cultural context. But that cultural context is irrelevant if a student is not clear about who they are and how they want to contribute. It's with that deep understanding of who they are that lived identity then becomes evidence when it shows up in decisions and leadership and impact. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, okay, this is great, but how does this actually practically apply to my student? Go ahead and download the guide below because I'm literally walking you through step by step, grade by grade, how to execute this. So there's one thing that elite systems reward that no one is talking about, often because education consultants wait until 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to actually promote their services to help your child. It's not perfection. It is not raw intelligence. It is actually self-management, and more specifically, metacognition. That word sounds academic, but the idea is incredibly simple. Metacognition is your child's ability to ask themselves, what's working for me? What's not working? What do I need to change? And then changing it without needing to be micromanaged. Why does that matter for admissions after 2023? Because when an Ivy League reader is looking at your student's profile, they're asking essentially to the effect, will this child thrive here without burning out or needing constant adult intervention? Will they make the most of the opportunities that we provide at this institution? Will they uniquely contribute to the culture of this institution? And for Black students, there's an extra unspoken layer. They're also asking, can the student navigate this environment and still stay intact? Metacognition is admissions armor. It's an invisible asset that turns that high-achieving GPA into a story of self-directed leadership. And it shows up in ways on paper that parents often miss. It shows up in consistency over years. Student that can explain why they chose what they chose. A student whose teacher describes them as reflective, steady, and initiative-driven. Remember Amanda's daughter I mentioned earlier? That shift from a bad grade means I'm done to a bad grade is data, that is metacognition. And the crazy thing about all this is that in middle school, when students developmentally are most impressionable to creating these habits of metacognition and self-awareness, this is when the schools actually double down on creating more structure. And parents, we often feel that tendency to start to micromanage the process. We're so focused on our students getting the great grades because we know how important that is, that we actually miss all of the underlying skill and habits that are necessary in order to ensure that those grades are not dependent on external forces to perform. So your student actually has the character, skills, values that college admissions officers are looking for, and most importantly, is going to make them successful in their future careers and their life beyond the classroom, their life beyond school. As a high-performing executive, I do not need to preach to you about why metacognition, as I laid out here, is critical to every facet of life, professionally and personally, when you are living out Black excellence. A student who has mastered their own skills of metacognition is authoring their journey. They're authoring their growth. And if they're authoring their growth, they can author their story. And post-affirmative action, that story is all the more central. Now, I want to end with something that may be the most important thing I say here, because some of you are watching this with a very specific fear that if the Ivy door got narrower, you meant you had to push harder. More APs, more awards, more programs, more prestige. And I need you to hear me. The private school that you're investing in, it simply means that your student is now competing with all the other kids at the private school. Prestige is not purpose. Prestige is not a guaranteed pipeline to the next prestige symbol. And prestige without an identity-safe plan is a fragile win, especially for Black students. Some of the schools with the hardest admit rates are the least equipped to support your student, not in the career pipelines and the internship opportunities, but in their wholeness that make those opportunities meaningful. So my definition regarding winning post-2023 is not Ivy League or top 20 at all cost. It's a purposeful competitive pathway that protects identity, supports well-being, aims at merit where it makes sense, and links college to career clarity from the onset. Because the real flex is not a hoodie. The real flex is your child arriving on campus already anchored. The real flex is you not overpaying for a degree that did not need to be overpaid for. Just because you have over $200,000 in that 529 does not mean that that money needs to get spent on undergrad. Go watch this video here on how high-income families can optimize for merit. You want to arrive at that decision season calm because you're operating from strength and not fear. And your strategy has been set strategically from the beginning. So here's what I want for you after this video. Not panic, not more pressure, clarity. Because yes, things change after 2023. And I'm not here preaching a guaranteed admission to an Ivy League school. But what I am saying is we cannot erase the quality of our students' childhood, their academic journey, and their career options simply to bend our backs for policies that are out of our control. We are not ever going to work our children into over-perfect robots. So if you want the grade-by-grade blueprint for how to do that without forcing a bunch of extracurriculars on your child, burning them out, burning yourself out, go ahead and get that grade-by-grade Ivy Readiness Guide with a link in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.